So over the last couple of weeks, couple of Sundays, my pastor has been talking about being change agents in the marketplace. And one of our confessions as members of the Covenant Nation is, being kingdom and marketplace influencers. And then coincidentally, or depending on how you put it or how you think about it, I've also been looking at the life of Joseph as part of my In the Life of Bible study series. So the first one was on Abraham, the second one was on Daniel, and then this one is now on Joseph. So I've gotten to the point in the study where he's now coming to power, and his brothers brothers and his family have been moved to Goshen to stay with him in Egypt. Because he has such a prominent position as prime minister, he could not go back to Canaan to meet with them, or to constantly send supplies with wagons back to Canaan for his family, or that constant trip between Canaan and Egypt to make sure his family did not die from the famine. So he had to be in Egypt as the prime minister, and then he's now ruling. He's taking care of his brothers, taking care of his father, taking care of their children, sorting out land for their flocks, all of that. And while reflecting on it, it then dawned on me that all we know is Pharaoh has this dream of seven years of famine, which came after 7 years of abundance. And Joseph having the wisdom and the insight of what they needed to do was to save 20% of all that they had. Now, a couple of things I want to kind of share today, and then we'll see how we go. The first one is when the Bible talks about there being a surplus harvest in all the lands of Egypt. So everywhere he built storage cities around the farm areas, there was people. He was gathering food, and he got to the point where gathering, he had gathered so much they lost count. They just kept gathering. So they had 20%. They could store 20% and effectively still live on the 80%. That they were farming. So whatever that bounty looked like, that 80% was almost kind of equivalent to what they would harvest on a normal year without that abundance. So they had that excess of 20. So the Egyptians had brought all their money. They've got to the point where they've brought all their money. Joseph had taken all their money and put it in Pharaoh's coffers or pockets or his house. The monies were there. And they came to him and said, "See, guy, we have nothing. We have no money to give you anymore. Come and take our lands, Come and take our lands." As I think the first thing was our cattle and everything. So he bought all the cattle, bought all the sheep, all the goats, all the rams, or whatever animals they had in existence then for Pharaoh, in exchange for grain that he had stored in the storehouses. Just hang with me a moment. That carries on for only God knows how many months, or maybe weeks, whatever. They run out of cattle to sell. They said, okay, what's the next thing to sell? Sell their lands. So they sell their lands to Pharaoh, and they sell themselves as slaves as well. And what they then agreed, or Joseph did for them, was, okay, Pharaoh has bought all your land, fair enough. But of course we need people to work on the lands. It's not just going to bring or do anything. But this was farming and everything. So how are they going to work? What seed, what grain did they have? Nothing. So he said, you will work the land, and then you will remit 20% of everything you work on the land back to Pharaoh. So technically Pharaoh has taken all the money. Pharaoh has taken all the cattle, he has all the herds, everything, livestock, he has it. He has their lands as well. And he technically has made them slaves. So the Egyptians were slaves of Pharaoh in a sense, because they were more or less working for him. But then I started asking myself, for those 7 years of surplus, of abundance, when Joseph was busy gathering food and storing in storehouses all around Egypt, he would think about it. He would have had to build storage facilities, to store all that grain. Because imagine he's catering to at least Egypt and Canaan, the land of Canaan. The Bible says the famine was sore, very sore in Egypt and in Canaan. So at least we know those two lands. We can extrapolate and say the famine was maybe around the world, and people from everywhere were coming to buy grain from Egypt. So what were the Egyptians and nearby residents of Egypt seeing Joseph do in storing all those grains? And didn't think, if somebody with such power and authority, second in command to the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is keeping 20% of all the harvest, surely there's instruction for me there to also store and keep back 20%. Because, for example, if it's in a corporate world, you might be like, oh, the company I'm working in is booming, their profits have tripled, we're selling out, we're having to make new products, hire new people. Profit margins have tripled in the last X amount of months, X amount of years. So they are increasing salaries. My salary has doubled. My salary has gone up by 50%, whatever. But I didn't realize that my company is not spending everything. So let's say I work in the finance. I see that the CEO or the CFO has said, oh, because of this surplus, we have to save 20% of every extra income that we make. Everything that must be set aside, and probably more, you know. And then they're just saying, okay, you take the salary, you take all the bonuses, da 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 da. I think there's an instruction there for us that when there is time, when we see people, particularly those in authority, making such decisions of savings, of you know, putting things aside, putting reserves. I mean, there's the current speak about, you know, US going into Bitcoin reserves and everything. I'm not saying go and buy Bitcoin, no, but I'm saying, what's if they are making investments, states in the US are making investments in those spaces. Maybe that's something we need to look into in terms of getting ourselves ready for just having that space, you know, if things do get difficult, if things do get crazy or whatever might be the case, you have something, you know, to fall back on. You have a buffer. You're not left hanging high and dry with having to sell everything that you have and not have nothing saved. You know, whether that's investing in gold, buying, if the price is dropping now with all the things that are happening, maybe investing in that, you know, getting something for yourself, saving something for yourself. Whenever you have a surplus of anything, the plan is, or the goal is not to, I don't know, buy the latest bag or the latest shoe or change your car or whatever tickles your fancy, but save that aside, that okay, there's a blessing here, there's a surplus here, what can I set aside, you know, to cover me just in case. We talk about emergency savings. So for me, that was like, okay, if you see somebody in power, somebody in authority making certain decisions on a huge scale that is not hidden, there's no way Joseph's storing of grain would have been hidden from the Egyptians. I find that difficult to believe that they didn't know that Pharaoh is storing food, whether they sold it to them as, oh, he's storing it for us, so hard times are coming, so but don't worry, enjoy your life, you'll be able to supply you, without realizing that you're going to have to pay for this food yourself. You're going to have to eventually sell your land, sell yourselves, become slaves of Pharaoh. So that's one thing I thought I would share. And I thought was, okay, once you see moves in a sense on the high level, start thinking, how can I replicate that move? Probably on a smaller scale, but for myself. The second thing that I was thinking about with regards to Joseph, which when I tell my friends, sometimes I say things like, I don't really like how the Bible was written, or who wrote the Bible, or what God did with this Bible. It would have been nice to see what he did. But think about it. You're storing food to feed at least a couple of nations, you know, for 7 years of famine. The kind of infrastructure he would have had to build, the kind of silos or pyramids or all those things, storage facilities or preservation techniques he came up with. If he was storing grain, I don't know how many grains can last and still be after harvesting for 7 years without some form of processing being applied to it, you know. All the technology that would have to come into place, all the negotiation with land, because if he's building storage facilities, then he would have to have, you know, maybe expanded or bought land from the people to see, we need to build this facility here. How do we negotiate that? How do we get those surplus off you? How do we make sure that the surplus doesn't just waste because it's too much food and then we have to throw it away because there's no place to preserve or to store it? So I'd have, don't you think it would have been nice to have seen or read of all the different things he came up with to help him make sure that he had a way of preserving enough food to feed at least 2 nations for 7 years of famine. The Bible talks about the famine being very sore. It wasn't some, you know, just like dry weather type of spell that later, no, it was proper famine. I would have liked to understood how he negotiated all those different things, and then coupled with the fact that he was a former slave, I'm sure there would have been different dynamics he would have had to deal with people that had been very close to Pharaoh's court, maybe being his advisors, all of that, and they're like, who is this Joseph? Who is this person that was a slave, that was in the prison, and that was even Potiphar's boy, as it were, or at least maybe not boy, but chief apprentice in his house, and you're coming to make him prime minister from where to where just because he gave you a couple of words of advice, and we'll come and implement it now. Let him just give us the way to do it and then go back to where he came from. But no, so having to navigate all those different things, he being Hebrew, him dealing with the Egyptians. The Bible says the Egyptians found shepherds to be an abomination. Meanwhile, the Hebrews were more agricultural, more nomadic, rearing animals, livestock in their dealing. So how did he manage to maintain his identity as a Hebrew, his convictions of who a Hebrew person was meant to be, coupled with being in a different land which served other gods? There was a priest of On who became his father-in-law, more or less. How did he manage that? Again, him getting married to the priest's daughter would have been like super promotion, kind of like David, when David had defeated Goliath on behalf of Saul and his army, and then Saul gave him his daughter to become his wife. That kind of quick promotion. How do you navigate all that political, personal relationships, opponents, people that probably were eyeing Potiphar's daughter, and then suddenly this guy from nowhere comes and marries him and has 2 sons and is now prime minister? So how did he navigate all those different things? Which is why I was saying I didn't like how it was written. I'd have liked to have, but I know God in his wisdom doesn't want us to be plug and play Christians where we just take one thing and apply it blindly, but to seek his face. Because yes, we have the general overarching principle of maintaining our communion and our fellowship with God, to be able to download those insights, those solutions to different things, to interpret the dreams of the people under whom we serve, who are bosses, who are line managers, to take the thing that they're trying to implement and bring powerful heavens, solutions and perspectives to those things that they are doing. So I just thought I would share those 2 things as you go into the work week, that you look for and trust the Lord to open your heart, open your mind, open your ears to him, to know what the solutions are to the different things that are top of mind for your organization. And like the wisdom that Joseph exhibited, the way he carried himself, the way he was able to handle Pharaoh, to deal with all the political issues in that space, being someone that was of a different persuasion, both of faith and of upbringing or tribe to Egypt. How did he manage that? And some of us might be in similar spaces where we're dissimilar to most of the people we work with, but we're Christians at the same time, and trusting God that as we commune with God, as we maintain that open channel with God, we begin to hear his heart concerning the things that are pertinent to organizations, to the different places we work with. And we're also sensitive to pick up intel as we read the news, as we interact with people, that this is happening on a global scale. How can I mirror that with myself on a much smaller scale? I hope that blessed you. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments. Have an amazing week ahead. God bless you. Bye.